All right, let's dive in. Today, we're talking about a massive shift happening in education. It's this move away from the old school one size fits all classroom and towards something way more dynamic, way more personal. It's what we call the learner centered revolution.
So let me ask you something. What if class felt less like a lecture and more like, I don't know, an adventure? I mean, think back to when you were in school. What are the moments that really stick with you? Was it sitting there listening quietly, or was it when you were actually doing something? That question right there is pretty much the core of what this is all about. Okay, so to really get what this shift is all about, we've got to go beyond the lecture hall. We need to compare the old way with the new way. It's like a tale of two very different classrooms. So, on one hand, you've got the classic teacher centered model. You know the one. The teacher is the sage on the stage, they have all the knowledge, and the students are basically there to absorb it passively. But then, you have the learner centered model, and this just flips the whole script. The focus is all on active engagement. Students are doing stuff, they're thinking, they're talking with each other. It's a huge change from just getting knowledge to actually building it for themselves. So, how does this actually work in practice? What's the secret sauce here? Well, this whole approach is built on three really powerful pillars of engagement. These are the big ideas that totally change the vibe of the classroom. First up, we've got active learning. And look, this isn't just about running around. It's about getting your brain firing. We're talking about learners who are actively engaged. They're doing experiments, they're debating big ideas, they're wrestling with tough problems. It is literally the definition of learning by doing. Pillar number 2 is cooperative learning. And I love this one because it basically turns learning into a team sport. Students get into these small, structured groups, and they work together to hit a common goal. And what's so cool is they're not just learning, say, history or science. They're picking up these absolutely vital skills like communication and real teamwork. And that brings us to our third pillar, inquiry-based learning. This one is all about turning students into little detectives. Seriously. Instead of the teacher just handing them the answers on a silver platter, they start with a big question or a tricky problem. And it's their job to go out, investigate, dig up evidence, and construct their own understanding from scratch. It's an incredible way to fire up their natural curiosity. Okay, so those three pillars, active, cooperative, and inquiry-based learning, those are the big picture ideas, right? But to actually make them happen in a real classroom, teachers need practical tools. And the good news is, there's a whole toolbox of techniques they can pull from. Just look at this. This gives you a great sense of just how many options there are. I mean, we've got everything in this learner center toolbox, from debates and role-playing to things like gamification. Now, there are 28 different strategies here, so obviously we can't go through every single one. But let's zoom in on a few of my favorites to see how they work. All right, first up, let's talk about the jigsaw method. This one is so clever. It literally turns the classroom into a living puzzle. So here's the nutshell version. Each student learns one specific part of a topic. They become the expert on that little piece. Then they get back together with their group and teach that piece to everyone else. The genius of it is that nobody has the full picture on their own. The puzzle only gets solved when everybody shares their part. It makes every single student essential, and it's amazing for building both knowledge and social skills. Okay, next tool from the box, project-based learning, or PBL for short. And with this one, you can just forget about those quick one-off assignments. Instead, learners work on a project over a longer period of time, tackling a messy, real-world problem. Their whole mission is to create something real and meaningful at the end. We're talking about things like designing a community garden, building a working prototype of an app, or launching an actual campaign. It's learning with a purpose. What about making learning a bit more fun? That's where gamification comes in. You know all the stuff that makes video games so addictive? Well, this strategy borrows those same ideas. So in a nutshell, you take game elements like earning points, unlocking achievements, or climbing a leaderboard, and you build them right into the learning process. It's a surprisingly effective way to crank up motivation and turn what could feel like a chore into a really engaging challenge. And for our last example, let's look at role play. This is all about getting students to step into someone else's shoes. So instead of just reading about a historical event, students actually act out the situation. Maybe they're debating a new law or negotiating a peace treaty. By doing this, they get a much deeper understanding of different perspectives, a kind of empathy that you just can't get from reading a textbook. So having this awesome toolbox is great, but the real magic, the real art of teaching is making learning personal. It's about using these tools to tailor the experience for every single student in the room.
And this gets us to a really crucial concept called differentiated teaching. The idea here is adapting for every learner. A teacher can tweak four main things. They can change the content, what the student learns. They can change the process, how they go about learning it. They can change the product, how the student shows what they've learned, and they can even change the learning environment itself. By adjusting these things based on a student's own readiness, their interests, or their learning style, that's when education stops being one-size-fits-all and becomes truly personal.
Okay, so we've seen the what and the how, but what about the why? Why does all this matter so much, especially right now in the world we live in today? Because let's be honest, the world we're preparing students for doesn't just need people who are good at memorizing facts. The whole goal here is to move beyond memorization. We need to cultivate critical thinkers, creative problem solvers, and people who know how to collaborate for life. These aren't just nice-to-have skills anymore. They are absolutely essential for the future.
And that leaves us with one last question, and this one's for you. Think about all these different techniques: the jigsaw method, project-based learning, gamification. Which of these techniques do you think would have totally changed your education? Imagine if you had that in your classroom. It's a pretty powerful thing to think about. Thanks for joining me.